Broadcasting live and worldwide. Here's Brody Brazil.
All right, this podcast and this YouTube video, it's not going to be tremendously long, but I think it's an important topic, especially because I'm on social media every day, probably too much, to tell you the truth. Pick up the phone on my off days. I pick up the phone when a TV show gets boring. I probably have a social media fixation. I probably need to scale it down a little bit. And for as much as I am putting stuff out there, I'm also consuming content. Again, more than I should, but because I'm so immersed in what is still a platform and a technology that is very much in its infancy, I feel like it's got to be discussed differently than older forms of media like radio and newspapers and television and magazines, because those things were not interactive. People could not seek you out as a broadcaster, as a publisher, as a radio host, and the game has changed dramatically. I think that's the biggest point. And because the game has changed that much, like, we need to establish some ground rules on occasion, because I feel like it turns into the wild, wild west, especially Twitter. Facebook lately, I don't even know if it's nearly as popular. Instagram is more of a photo-related platform, and comments are there, don't get me wrong, and I've seen a lot of good comments and a lot of bad commenting, but I feel like Twitter is just really where the conversation happens the most, and especially happens in real time. So speaking of Twitter, it's where I put out a thought recently that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper on, because I thought I put it out on a pretty basic level, but there's so much more to it. So here's what my tweet said. Things that don't matter: blue check marks, profile bios, and follower counts. Things that do matter: accountability, willingness to listen, and sensibility. All right, so let's start with the things that don't matter. Blue check marks. What am I talking about here? Being verified. A lot of people here in 2019 still wrongly perceive you as having a status symbol because you're verified, when in reality, it's an identity thing. It's just to prove to people, hey, when John Doe tweets this, that is actually John Doe, because there's also 20 other fake ones. Or how do I know this is really John Doe, even on Twitter, that they have an actual Twitter account? I mean, I don't even know. I think it was 2011 or maybe 12 when I was verified. I've had it, quite honestly, for a lot longer than most people. And I'm not saying that as a humble brag. This is just the reality and the truth. When I got it maybe was more of that status symbol. There was a lot of exclusivity to it, especially on Twitter. I would say that still holds true on Instagram. Instagram seems to be a little bit more diligent, selective in who they verify with the blue check mark. But Twitter these days, it's a common occurrence for it to get handed out, and certainly not just to the on-air broadcasters, but to producers, to photographers, to people that are putting content out there and representing a brand. But again, to think that just because somebody has a blue check mark that they are truthful, thoughtful, that you can necessarily trust them. I mean, imagine if this was real life and somebody walking down the street had just a little blue check mark on their sweater. Oh, trust this guy. He got a blue check mark from somewhere. Right? Doesn't make any sense. Profile bios, I feel like, are also something that don't matter. And when I say that, a profile bio is like somebody's profile picture on social media. And look, you could point to me as a prime example of this. I got that nice headshot, the one split second, the 1/100th of a second where I actually looked half decent. The light was hitting me the right way. I had the smile on the right way. And of course, the thing got, the picture ended up getting all photoshopped anyway, right? But you understand my point. Your profile picture is kind of like your profile bio. It is your best split second And in a lot of ways, it can be misleading. It's like a biography for some people. It's like a resume for a lot of people. And I guess it should tell others who you are, especially if they're encountering you. But, to list like your life's accomplishments on a biography or, a social media biography, I don't know. It just seems like something that shouldn't matter. In terms of, I'm not saying liking a person or not. I'm saying trusting a person or not. And then the last one is follower accounts. I mean, think about all the people that you follow on social media, specifically Twitter, though. Are you telling me you think none of them have ever bought a follower? I don't think it's as common anymore, but I know years ago, there were a lot of people out there that were buying followers, fake followers. And I think Twitter over the years has done a really good job of deleting all of those bot type accounts that are just there to follow others. And in fact, I've even noticed it on my profile, especially within the last couple years. All of a sudden one day, and I'm not daily, checking it on a daily basis of Twitter followings, but you look at it one day and you're like, okay, there's, 60,000. Okay. Because you just recognize that as being a number. A couple weeks later, 58,000? Where did 2,000 people go? Well, Twitter went through and deleted some of the bots that were following you. Then I didn't ask them to do it. I didn't ask the bots to follow me. I didn't ask Twitter to get rid of them, but they did. And that's a good thing. Nobody needs fake accounts on there. And I'm not diving into that whole conversation as it relates to maybe politics. Forget that. I'm just saying from the perspective of trusting other people via how many followers they have, I think that's a bad idea, right? Just because somebody has 10,000 or 100,000 or 1.5 million followers, does that mean that they're going to be responsible, in covering a story or putting something out there that you think is appropriate or not? And I'll get into the things that do matter here in just a second. So I don't want to sound like such a downer here and say don't trust everybody, but you should really let somebody's track record do all the talking, right? You should look at the stuff they're putting out there to the world and say, all right, I'm going to kind of judge that on who this person is, whether I want to be a part of that or not. Okay, so what are the things that do matter? Accountability. Let's throw out an example here. If you get something wrong on social media, and I mean, I don't know anybody who does this. If you get it wrong, do you go back later and admit it? Do you maybe respond to your own tweet and say, man, I thought things were one way. They're not. I screwed up. Maybe even here's why. If you can, if that's a possibility. I feel like a lot of people just either delete something, they let it stand, and then they move on because time and the cycle of time in 2019, it erases almost everything incorrect because people just move on to something else and you can forget about your mistake. So another part of accountability for me is that I have a golden rule. I never say something on television, for example, about an athlete that I also wouldn't say if they or their family were in the room. I feel like it's disrespectful because I'm also a person who shows up to a clubhouse, to a dressing room, to a locker room, to a stadium, to an arena. And if you feel comfortable saying everything that you would put on social media, you're fine. Because it takes some thought, it takes some tactical strategy to say what you want to say in a proper way, and also feel comfortable showing your face, if you cover sports, showing your face to the people that you're discussing on social media for everyone to see. I think that's important, accountability. The willingness to listen. And again, I'm not going into a further perspective of maybe what's right and wrong on social media, but Jack Dorsey is Twitter's founder, and I love the term he uses for something that is wrong with the platform, and that is an echo chamber. Twitter is very much an echo chamber. You're only on there to listen to the people that you agree with, that you associate with, that you want to be in their circle. Do you ever listen to the other side? That's one thing about maybe watching an old school nightly news broadcast. And I say old school, it still exists. They still do just fine with television ratings and in terms of like pure storytelling and journalism and responsibility, most of them do an excellent job. They might present some things that you don't agree with, but you're forced to watch because you can't just scroll away from the story. It's on your television. On social media, though, you see something you don't like, unfollow, mute, block, don't go back there again, don't search for that hashtag, whatever. You get to live in the ideal social sphere that you want to. You get to choose your echo chamber. So for me, things that do matter on social media is just a willingness to listen. Doesn't mean you have to like what an opposing view says or who said it, but the willingness to listen. Maybe even have the conversation. That's probably the next step. But I'm not even suggesting you need to engage. You just need to have the willingness to listen. And then the last thing here is sensibility. There's a lot of times as a broadcaster who's on social media, and I put out content and thoughts, perspectives, and again, some people from opposing cities and opposing viewpoints, they don't agree with what I've said, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying it in a violent way or in a confrontational way. I'm just saying some thoughts. But a lot of times, responses are confrontational in nature. People will come right back at me with something. Okay, it's part of the job. I get it. But I think it's the sensibility for me and for others too. And I'm just using myself as the example because I've experienced it. But I think it's super important when you look at the people that you want to associate with on social media. Are they sensible? Do they get unnecessarily heated? Or do they have these venting sessions on other people on social media? Do they use social as a place to literally attack others? For important stuff, for irrelevant stuff, do they use it as just a soapbox continuously where they just want to rip into other people? Twitter can be a cruel place, especially with the aspect of anonymity, right? I mean, you don't have to put your real name, photo, nothing on there. And that's empowering to a lot of people. And it should be empowering to some people in some situations. But when we're talking about sports topics, for the most part, anonymity is just there to protect people who want to be cruel to others, right? And a lot of times in a lot of ways. So, and maybe you've experienced this, especially if you're heavy into social media, whether you've been a part of it or you've observed it, but it's definitely out there. So again, those are things that don't matter, and I think things that do matter on social media here in 2019. Speaking of that, thank you so much if you're watching this on YouTube or maybe you're listening on the podcast. Either way, I would appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, why not subscribe and get more of this content in the future? Also, yes, talked a lot about Twitter. I'm on there, especially during Sharks and A's games, as well as Instagram. I've been working especially hard over there to put out what I think is good content on a regular basis. So that does it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brody Brazil. And yes, that is my real name.